Hello, friends out there. How are you? Thank you for those that have joined us today. And this is going to be recorded as well for those of you that are going to miss kind of the live version of today's just short, quick, 30 minutes pondering of chakras and psychology and some upcoming online asana work and yoga classes that are going to incorporate some of these thoughts and some of these topics. So this has been very near and dear to my heart. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Liz. I've been practicing yoga now for about 18 years, which makes me feel a little bit old. And I always like to start by saying that when I first found yoga, I was that student that would show up late to class and then skip Shavasana at the end. There it is. There's my disclaimer. That's the kind of yogi I was. So if you're a yogi like that as well, and you understand where I'm coming from, just hang with me, okay? So I did that for about 5 years. And luckily, I had some pretty amazing teachers that were patient with me in that time period of recognizing how much time it was going to take me to start to actually consider some of the deeper realms of yoga and what it had already begun to invite into my life. Why do I share this? I share this because it's to give hope, and it is also to humbly express how it is that I came to end up talking about psychology and chakras and some incredible writers that have offered us some amazing books to kind of dive deeper into some of these self-reflection and self-awareness. So I've been practicing for 18 years. I told you the first 5, I skipped everything. I didn't have time for it. I didn't want to slow down. I liked physical practice, but I really wasn't quite getting the depth of what yoga has truly become into my life now. So from there, I started practicing more and I started to say, oh, you know what, there's something to this laying in Shavasana for the last 5 minutes of class. There's something to this moment where we just get to assimilate everything that we just created. It's like that alchemy portion where there's nothing to add. It just gets to simmer and come back into whole. And that is yoga, right? That is this yoke, this union, this bringing back together. So that is kind of the baby steps that I took to arrive into this place of a deeper yoga practice, a deeper idea of what this union really means. And as I started to continue with this practice, much to my, how do I say this, surprise, I started to realize that once you begin that journey, you don't really get to get off the train. So once you start this path of kind of paying attention to yourself and your life and the things that you've been doing and your habit patterns, once you know, you can't not know. So that's kind of continued me on this journey. Then I started to get into Ashtanga yoga, which is a pretty intense physical practice, and went to India to study it there with Saraswati Joyce. And that was a very humbling experience in the physical realm for me, and also in the mental realm of sticking with things. And again, this idea of bringing together, yoking back in. Fast forward a little bit of time, I started practicing here in Virginia Beach, which is where I'm currently located. And I started to dive more into this idea of the chakras. I first heard about them in my 200-hour teacher training, and I didn't want anything to do with them, didn't really believe in anything that they were kind of discussing. I knew there was some energetic realms because obviously something had been shifting in my life, but I hadn't really opened myself up to really study them or recognize my habitual patterns with them. Now, I like to preface this with, there are many schools of thought about the chakras, and we're going to get into exactly what a chakra is. But from my point of view, when I first started, it had to do with a very metaphysical kind of idea, and not really grounded in the physical form and in my body and in my yoga and asana practice. And so that's kind of where I began this practice from. And with time, the chakra and the chakra energy that we're going to discuss and the psychology of it, it slowly started to take root into my sensations and my awareness in the physical body. And then I started wanting to know more about where these habit patterns came from. And that is when I kind of jumped that realm into looking deeper into the psychology portion of it, looking deeper into the shadow energy of it. So that's kind of the intro. It seems like it's going like this. That is on purpose, because now I am going to get a little bit deeper. I hope we get somebody joining. Hi, Amber. Welcome. Um, we have, let me pull this back up. Mute. All right. So that was kind of that roundabout journey. And I've just been explaining kind of how I came to even care about psychology and the chakras. And basically, I started out with a yoga practice that wanted nothing to do with Shavasana, nothing to do with slowing down. Then I crept into the world of, okay, they talk about this thing called the chakras and these energy centers, but that doesn't really apply to me at this moment. And then I started to recognize this patterns and the sensations in my body in certain asana practices and certain days where we'd get deeper into the hips or we'd get deeper into throat opening poses. And again, we haven't touched yet on where those locations are of the chakras, but just this idea of how this intro to these ideas. I actually had a private student of mine that I was doing online courses with, and she's like, I really want to learn yoga, but don't talk to me about the chakra bullshit. Like, I just don't go there with me. She was a doctor, so of course she was like pretty rooted in her teachings and her education. So, and I understood that. I totally got it. But as I started to deepen my own practice and kind of explore, as I mentioned, some of these habitual patterns, I really wanted to understand the psychological piece of it too. I wanted to understand what it was in my own past, what it was in my own childhood, what it was in my own life, what it was in what's been passed down, through my own biography and biology, that has also created this person right here called Liz, and all of the habits that she has in her personality. So I started to study more of the chakras, not just in the physical sense, but also in the spiritual sense, in the mental sense, and how can I better understand and use this tool of this mix of understanding the Eastern energies and kind of this Western way of analyzing it to better just understand myself and take that deeper into my practice when I'm actually practicing yoga poses. Okay, so that's kind of how this came about, these mergings. And then I'd say for the past 3 years, it has just been my life's work of wanting to study and get to know. In my 200-hour teacher training, we structure the whole thing based on the chakras, and we go through them over 7 weeks, and we talk about, when we're going through them, not just the energy of it and the locations. We talk about the poses associated. And we talk about, again, the psychological aspects of, okay, let's now use this. Let's take a look back at our own lives and see what's being triggered when we get into each and every one of these different poses, or what might come up. Hip openers, they are routinely known for making people break into tears, right? Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it has to do with the emotional energy that is stored in that area of the body. So again, I just wanted to take today a little 30-minute thing for those of you with me. It's going to be recorded as well. I'm going to share it out just to kind of talk. So I want to talk about the overview of the chakra energy. I want to talk about some of the resources, all the books I've read. I'd love to share them with you so you can dive deeper into that as well. The chakras, and can we change them? Okay, again, there's many schools of thoughts on this. And by bringing awareness into chakra centers, do we shift them? Can we physically shift them? Is that real or not? All right, and I'm not one to tell you either way. For me, I tend to feel an experience with it by mentally and energetically bringing awareness into those areas, but some people don't believe so, and so some people just use them more as kind of an analytical way of approaching them. I also really want to make a point of the fact that this is not therapy, right? Everything that I share are offerings and tools of things that I've experienced or things that I've studied or ways that I've approached this and integrated into my own life that I'm just offering to you to maybe start to explore on your own. I will also say that I usually speak once a week with a psychotherapist and a dream worker. This is no soft approach to this. I'm not advocating this. I'm not saying you have to do this, but if you want to take it to those deeper places, I recommend getting professional support as you do this. I've used that on one hand, the professional network. I've also just personally, like I said, dove into this, studied this, tried to analyze this in my own life, journaled with it, practiced with it, moved that energy in my own body on the mat. And that's where a lot of my classes kind of come from. So I just want to really say this is not therapy. This is a place and a modality of just explaining and sharing what that I have kind of combined in my own studies as a framework to take it deeper into your own practice of your own self-awareness and self-reflection and personality. You know, again, where does this come from? This human being that I interact with every day, that I go out into the world with a certain intention, and then sometimes she gets in the way, right? Like her thoughts, her ego, her needs, whatever's happened to bring me into this point in my life, right? Like sometimes I'm taking out there this chaotic woman, and sometimes I'm taking out to the society this very calm and centered woman. So just kind of being able to recognize those pieces, right? That is what this is about. That's what today's about. That's what some of my other psych and chakra courses are about, and going to be coming up about with, I'm going to integrate them too with an asana practice in the future. So yeah, it's just a framework. I want to talk about the physical locations in a moment. We're going to get actually into where the chakras are, where they came to be known, why they're in those locations, what, you know, the physical understanding of them, even though they're not necessarily, you can't touch it, right? I want to talk about the energies of it, the psychological energies of three things: deficiencies in these chakras, balances, and excess. All right. So, and we can be a combo of all three of those in every single one of these chakras, and they shift, right? So just because maybe at one point in my life I've been going through something where the heart chakra is either excessive or deficient or balanced, that might change a year later. That might change 2 years later. So we're going to get into kind of the developmental stages of the chakras. And I'm going to talk about the resources that have come with this and why I'm even presenting this to you and who I have learned from and studied with to bring that about. We're going to talk about them in terms of traumas and healings and things that might have happened in people's lives. We're going to talk about again, we can't look at them individually. I just read a post the other day about feminine and masculine, right? We celebrated International Women's Day. I'm a woman. Yes, of course. Who doesn't want to celebrate their own day? But I felt like when we were talking about that day, we can split things apart to analyze them and look at them, but we can never fully understand them until we put it back into its holistic approach, right? So until we have all the different pieces, just like the chakras, we can study them individually, but they are so interconnected that we can't just pick them apart and go, oh, this one's off or that one's off or this one's wrong. If there's a deficiency or excess in one of the chakras, it's usually associated with a deficiency or excess in another one of the chakras as well. So just kind of always remembering that as much as we try to analyze things from a piece by piece, it's all combined, it's all united, it's all a part of who we are, that energy moving up and down from kind of the soul body into kind of the spirit realm, right? And there's always these two currents kind of going up and down, this grounding aspect and then this liberation current. So we can't forget that energy is constantly flowing up and down. So none of these exist in a vacuum. I want to talk about the relationship with them with yoga, right? With the yoga practice, with the asana practice, with what happens on our mat when we physically move through a standing series of really strong, solid warrior poses. Or again, we get into deep back bends and heart openers and that vulnerability and exposure that comes with opening up this part of our chest and this part of our heart and this place where maybe we have, you know, excessive boundaries, or maybe we don't have enough boundaries, right? And how that plays into the physical practice of yoga. I'm not saying that necessarily looking at somebody's body type and the way that they practice that you can see their issues, right? However, I am saying that I have personally in my own life experienced within my own body areas where there was more tightness or more liberation that was associated with different things going on in my life as well. So I want to talk about those. And then lastly, I really want to touch on, you know, some of the physical openings. So as I mentioned, some people believe that we can shift and change and transform the energy in different chakras. And some people would believe that we can't. They think that it's just, you know, you can just look at it from a mental place. However, these vortices of energy do associate with certain glands and certain hormones in our body and certain nervous system responses. So I think it would be a little bit naive as we talk about this to ignore the fact that it does have to do with physical changes in when we bring awareness into certain areas and when we discuss certain areas. It's why, you know, the heart center, right? We can charge this area simply by thinking about somebody that we love, right? Somebody that just warms us up. We call them to mind. We bring it into our head. We bring it into our thoughts, and we can physically alter the state of feeling within our bodies. So we can actually change the chemical conditioning inside of our bodies using our thought patterns, right? So we'll touch on that a little bit. So without further ado, I've given you the overview of kind of the things I want to touch, kind of the things that I'm passionate about right now in talking about any of these topics. The chakras. All right. They've been around for thousands of years, right? Indian philosophy kind of brought it into our life or into the world, and really discussed these ideas of these vortices of energy. We talk about prana. Prana is that life force, right? That subtle life force, not the gross kind of life force of the physicality, but that really subtle channel of energy. That's that feeling that when you see someone you know, and you can feel the energy exchange between the two of you that exists outside of touch or of being able to hold or grasp onto something. So prana, as it flows throughout the body, we have channels, right? There are channels throughout our body, throughout the nervous system, these nadis, these highways of energy. Now in the philosophical realm of this, there's Ida and Pingala, right? Ida is the feminine side, and Pingala is the more masculine. Now they start at the base of the groin, and they kind of come up, and then they crisscross throughout the body, and they crisscross through, and this is where it gets kind of strange, but different vortices of energy. Now, we have most, I would say, yoga teacher trainings talk about 7 in general. That doesn't mean that that's all there is. Some people believe there's 8. Some people believe there's 12. Some people believe there's 15. Some people believe there's 5. Okay, so when I talk about them, we usually try to stick with the pretty common understanding of the 7. Now, that current of energy that kind of comes up and crisscrosses, it gets all the way to the top, and then it loops back down. And so again, those sides of Ida and Pingala that kind of crisscross, that line of energy throughout the center are where those two kind of intersect. And it creates this kind of wheel or this circle of energy in one direction or another, depending on which way one's going up. So, right, so one vortice in one chakra, the bottom chakra, might spin clockwise. The next one up might spin counterclockwise. The third one, clockwise again. And so they kind of go back and forth all the way up through the crown. Now there's 7 that we're going to discuss. Okay, the first 3 have more to do with the physical realm. Again, there's these 2 currents of energy, right? One is down, body and soul. The other one is up, a liberation current back to spirit. So the bottom 3 are often thought of as a very part of the physical world, right? It's how we survive. It's sexuality, it's identity, it's how we interact with others. And then we meet in this place of the heart, the 4th. And then the upper 3, which we'll get into as well, have more to do with this liberating current, this connection to the divine, whatever you want to call it, your version of God, your just connection to other people, right? There's so many different forms of considering this interconnectedness, but in the center is the heart chakra, right? And so everything is going up and down. So we're going to talk about the first 3, and then we'll talk about the heart, and we'll talk about the top 3. So starting right away with Muladhara. And if you're familiar with the chakras, stick with me because we are going to get into some other aspects of them. So Muladhara has to do with root. And the locations of the chakras for yoga, we often talk about them in terms of their color, in terms of the energy in that area, the vibrations, right? So the root, it's red, it's our grounding place, it's security, it's survival instincts. It has to do with the legs, the bones, right? The structure of the body. It has to do with money. It has to do with safety. It has to do with family patterns. It has to do with all of those things that you consider just roots growing down almost like a tree, right? Now it also, that is kind of the yoga understanding. Those are the things we kind of talk about, the roots, right? We talk about Muladhara. We talk about Mula Bandha, the bottom lack of energy. Then we get into Svadhisthana, which is the second. The color is orange. So the vibration gets a little bit quicker, right? It's a little bit higher vibration here. We get into sexuality. We get into creativity, how we express ourselves with others, how we energy exchange with others, where we sell ourselves off, where we don't sell ourselves off, right? Like this place of fluidity. All right. So as we move through the chakras, we're going to talk about different things. Colors, of course. We're going to talk about vibrations. We're going to talk about the rites. So the different rites of being in each of these places. So if we go back to the first chakra. We could talk about Muladhara as the root chakra. The right is to be here, right? The right is, can I exist? I have a right to be here. I have a right to live. I have a right to all of the things that will make me feel stable to even exist, right? So we're going to talk about rights. We're going to talk about fears. Sorry, not fears, but we're going to talk about shadows. The shadow of the first chakra is fear, which is why I brought that one up, which obviously right now in our communities, in our society with what's going on is incredibly triggered. Everybody is being triggered right now in the root chakra. Because again, it has to do with stability, money, small businesses. I've personally felt this, right? My yoga retreats are taking a major hit. People are freaking out left and right, understandably, right? It's scary. It's a scary time, which is in myself triggered me in that chakra of, oh my gosh, how am I going to keep providing, whatever it is. So everyone is being triggered right now in that chakra. And I think it's really important to recognize that stability, safety, fears of money, fears of not enoughness. So that right to be here. Do I have a right to be here and to have enough? We'll talk about rights. We're going to talk about the elements, right? So you can't talk really about the chakras without talking about the elements. So the earth, obviously, is for the first chakra, the earth energy to it. We'll talk about kind of purposes of those chakras. And then we're going to talk about their identities. So each of the chakras has a different identity. So chakra 1 is usually associated with self-preservation, right? That makes sense. Stability, safety, fear, money, all of those things, family matters. It could tie into things like divorce if you grew up. It could tie into things like refugees, right? Parents that came over, grandparents. And again, this might not just be in our lives, but it might be passed down through generational things that are now stuck that we are working through, right? So have you ever heard that quote where they say, everything that I've done and everything that I've healed is also healing those women or men in my past as well. So those are the kind of the things that we're going to get into. So we've got Muladhara, the root. I've kind of used that for a moment here to just get into it. We're going to talk about developmentally. So root chakra has to do with about second trimester to, I think it's like 6 months old or so, which makes sense. This is when this chakra is first starting to get developed as a child. Am I safe? What does a baby cry about? I need food. I need love. I need safety. I need to be held. I'm cold, whatever it is, right? All of those things that are being kind of built upon at that point in life. So then we get into Svadhisthana, like we talked about, moving up a little bit into fluidity, the element's water, right? The color is orange. It has to do with the right to feel, right? That right to feel. The identity is self-gratification. Am I allowed to enjoy something? Am I allowed to feel into it, into the creativity of the things that it sparks within me? Can I have passion for something? So all of those things, Svadhisthana stands for sweetness, like the sweetness of life. It is all of those things that are, how do we take enjoyment out of something and be in the present with it enough to enjoy it? Or are we using in a way that we are trying to manipulate more enjoyment? Are we overly sensational or emotional? And then this is where it kind of ties in with all of those things we talked about at the beginning of deficiencies in these chakras, balances, or excess, right? So we've got those 3 realms and we're always dancing between them. And it's always probably tied, as I mentioned, to another chakra. So we could see how someone maybe with an issue in the first chakra of safety and survival maybe has learned how to use sexuality in a way that makes them feel safe in their lives, right? That maybe they've become more or overly sexualized in the way that they manipulate or deal with other people. Why? Because the first chakra is the one that's really deficient as well. And so then they're excessive in the second. So that's just a very rudimentary example of how they can really be connected. Then we move up into the third chakra. This has to do with our self-identity, right? So that's the identity with this one. The name is Manipura, the color is yellow. And again, the right here is to act, to be able to act. It's, do I have the autonomy to express myself and make action in this world? So these are I just want to kind of highlight some of all the different pieces of the chakras we're going to talk about. And in these courses later on, that really take a deeper dive into all of them and how they're related. So really talking about, the yoga aspects, the asanas associated, as I mentioned. So Manipura, the third chakra, is very much associated with hip opening. I'm sorry, not hip opening, twists. Why? Because Manipura has to do with that part of our body of friction, the pieces of our lives that create friction. Twists in our body create friction. You take a duality of things going in the opposite direction, it creates friction, it creates heat, causes transformation. What does that have to do with? Our digestive tract. It has to do with how we assimilate energy or how we release it if we don't need it through our bodies. So all of those things kind of come into play, and this is what I really just wanted to cover. We're going to talk about asana practice, we're going to talk about the physical realm, we're going to talk about the psychological realm, we're going to talk about developmentally, we're going to talk about traumas, we're going to talk about healing throughout not just the yoga practice, but again, journaling and all the other modalities that we can have to just kind of self-reflect and take a look at these. So that's kind of the brief intro. Again, I just wanted to keep this kind of short and sweet. These are the things I'm going to get into more and more. I am putting together a longer 2-hour course that's going to be called like a 101, that's going to go through all of the chakras, all of the stuff that has to do with yoga, asana, and poses, the psychology pieces of it, the glands, as I mentioned, and more of the physical realm of where they're located. And then I want to offer in the future, and I'm still looking at dates and I'm still looking at times and what people are truly interested in with this, but I want to take the two and combine them. And I want to do that in about 7 different 2-hour models, so that we really take 2 hours to look at each chakra individually. One of those hours will be for studying it mentally, right? And intellectualizing the process of whatever it is we're talking about, and then flowing through an hour of the practice. Or I might switch those and do an hour-long asana practice first to deal with. So for example, if we were doing Manipura, obviously it'd be a heavily twisting class, to kind of stimulate some of that energy, to get that fire kind of stoking, so that we can really kind of tap into if we talk about it afterwards or before, what it means. How do we feel that in our bodies? So this isn't just for yoga teachers at all. This is just for any of us that want to take a deeper dive. We like yoga, we like meditation. Maybe you don't like either, and you just want to like learn more about, again, the psych chakra work, this Eastern Western body idea. So I wanted to share at the end here, I just have a few more minutes, I want to share some of my favorite books that I take so much from when I've been studying all this. Let's start first and foremost. This one's probably the most important in my life. It's called Eastern Body, Western Mind. And Anadea Judith, gets into all of this. A lot of what we've been talking about is her work and how it associates with the chakras. Another big one is Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mice. Again, she talks a lot about the chakras, how it's associated with our lives, how our spirit is kind of created from this. The Body Keeps the Score. Incredible book, just to talk about trauma, to talk about developmental stages again, where it gets stored, why it's stuck within us, how can we move it. Our body remembers everything that's happened to us, whether we acknowledge it or not, whether we're conscious of it or not. We are sticking it someplace. We are sticking that energy. It's like a garage or an attic sometimes. And so what we do with the yoga practice is we move energy to try to stoke it enough that it can transform to something else. Well, what happens if you start to stoke energy, but then you don't want to look at it? You just shove it and hide it someplace else in the body because you're not ready to actually kind of take that step forward. And that's kind of where I was mentioning that sometimes professional work or a psychotherapist or somebody just to work with, like I said, I work through my dream work with someone as well, just to have that extra person on the outside to help walk you through some of that. So this is a really good book for talking about trauma and yoga, and just why the body holds on to these things within us. Another one is Sacred Contracts. Love this one, Carolyn Mice. Just an incredible book. It talks about why relationships and why we have some of the relationships we do in life, what we're being triggered by in our own lives through these relationships, and what these sacred contracts are, right? That we meet other souls on this journey, not to just be happy and not to have good relationships that are easy, but that there's something within them that is teaching us to take a deeper look. And so it's really cool to use this book again as kind of that intersection with the chakra energy and what it is and the psychology of it. What's being triggered in me? Why is this boyfriend or this husband or this sister or this wife or this mother or any of those relationships, that child in our lives or kid, whoever it is, why am I being so triggered by it, right? Whether it's an argument or whether it's the positives. out of a relationship too. So really cool book to talk about like the contracts that our souls made, whether you believe it or not, before we came into this world, of the things that we wanted to heal, whether in ourselves or through our past generationally. So love that one. Super cool one, Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. This one gets really into the physical realm of meditation and kind of what I was talking about and tapping into about how when we bring attention and awareness into certain areas of our body, we can actually change the chemical experience. And one of the ways that he talks about this is by, it's kind of this, I had this amazing meditation teacher called Peter Opperman, and we would do future self meditation. So we would meditate on a sensation or a feeling we wanted to have in the future, or a person we wanted to be in the future, right? That dream state of who you see and who you know you are underneath all of it, that future self. And that by kind of connecting with that energy of that future self, or by connecting with this higher vibration within the body, we can actually alter the current state of reality. We can alter the current state of our chakras, right? So really cool, gets into all the gland stuff, gets into a lot of the physical realm of when we talk about the chakra system and what those meditation and awareness work can really do for it. This is a personal favorite of mine, Revolution of the Soul, one of my dearest yoga teachers. If you could ever take a workshop with her, she taps into a lot of this. She has a chakra healing workshop, which is kind of where, similar to what I'm going to be offering as well, where she does it over a weekend, where she uses the asana practice to help tap into the energies and move it and transform it with an awareness of the chakra system, you know, kind of is associated with the different poses. This book's incredible, just incredible. I love her. And last but not least, this book was written by a dear friend and spiritual mentor, the woman that I work with every week. She's a psychotherapist, and she's also a shaman and energy worker. So every week that I talk to her, we do, again, dream work, psychology work. We do tarot cards. We do natal chart readings. She touches on all of it. So her name is Annette Hulefeld, and she wrote this book called Rooted in the Stars, Planet on the Earth. So funny. She's freaking hilarious. She's she's older and wiser in age, and yet she can't help but curse constantly and make tons of fart jokes. So I adore her. I adore this book. Again, if you just want to kind of tap into some other areas and have it incredibly, it's fast, it's not too long, but a really fun read along the way with it, that book's awesome. So I'll post some of these books that I use and that have been just important in my life. And if you're interested, so yeah, I'm going to be coming up with those courses in the future. I haven't completely nailed it down. Like I said, I want to do a 2-hour course for those that just want to study it more. And then I want to offer like a 14-hour, which is 2 hours per chakra, 7 different modules of it. And I'm looking to do this stuff in about April or May, depending. So if you want to do the asana practice with it, that would be the one to do as well. So I'm going to keep this short and sweet, ending it here. So thanks for taking the time to either watch this live or watch this on the recording. If you have any questions, as always, you can shoot me an email at walkaboutyoga@gmail.com or visit the website walkaboutyoga.com. Got some cool retreats coming up this year and next, some in Europe, some not in Europe, some in the States. I've got some trainings coming up this fall in the States, and then there's like one of my ones I'm most excited about is the Safari Yoga Retreat in a year in Tanzania that's being put together, as well as some Amalfi Coast retreats where we get a Capri and Grand Cayman this fall. So there's a couple of them on there if you want to check it out. So let me know what you think of this video. I would love feedback. I'm new to all of this. I'm just kind of throwing myself out there to start sharing the things that have been such a passion in my life for the last few years and how I weave them all together. And again, that's the yoga, the union of it, of kind of bringing all these pieces and not being able to look at them separately, but as a whole. So thanks for spending some time with me. I appreciate you. Namaste. Don't worry about coronavirus. We're gonna make it through this, right? Through all the fear. I know that there's a lot. I'd be naive to not mention it here that has to do with this video, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about Muladhara in particular and the fear that has really just been triggered in all of us due to the safety and stability. So I'm with you out there, that we can be kind, still, and compassionate and empathetic with those around us, whether they agree with us or not. We're all being triggered, so just remember that. So, all right, take care. Peace. Bye.